You know, I was thinking they would at least have armchairs, but for the fireside chat. But just imagine that we're in front of a fireplace, smoking a pipe and drinking cognac. Shaq, you came from Spotify, so you were part of the big disruption in the music industry some years ago. What parallels, if any, do you see from that experience in what's going on today with money?
So, the first one would probably be a personal one, that I do know how to pick the industries which are going to give me the biggest headache. There's far easier industries to get involved in. But one way you could look at it, the conversation in the early days of Spotify used to be, we'd go out there and talk to people who'd go, well, I really need to own my music. I need to feel the CD. That conversation then went on to, well, I need to own my download. Did they actually own a download? It was a file on their computer. That conversation's now stopped, and I'll explain how that comes onto the digital currency side of things. But the DVD space is a similar thing. I'm sure you all remember people buying DVDs and having bespoke cabinets built for their DVD collection. These days, everyone streams off iTunes or from Netflix, so the ownership has gone away. This physical feel and touch of a product or a good of whatever value has actually diminished. Now, if you look at the money side of things, and prime example is there was just a report this week that over 10% of Starbucks transactions are now being done via smartphones. I may be off by 1 or 2%, but around 10% of all transactions, when somebody walks into Starbucks, it's basically pulling their phone out. They're no longer reaching into their pocket or their wallet to take money out. So technology and smartphones have fundamentally shifted what ownership of whether it's content or certain goods were. Now, how I always try and explain Bitcoin and the digital currency space that we're in is, why is it in 2013 I can send you an email, a text message, a voice message, an audio message, any kind of file, it'll take you 2 seconds, but you say to me, hey Shaq, you owe me $10 for that pizza from last week, and I'm like, well, I'll try and send it to you. The amount is $10, my bank's going to charge me $27 transaction fee, and hopefully you may get it next week, and that isn't guaranteed. So if you just look at that divide, and we live in a world where real time is not real time enough, and then you've got this banking system which is slower than it's ever been. So those similarities start coming into play because the technology is now there, as has been proven by Bitcoin. And prime example is Apple's App Store, microtransactions there. The friction has been removed, and we just need to do more things to make it more frictionless.
Do you think that money and banking might be a little bit different in the sense that banking and financial services are protected industries? You and I can't just start a bank, wake up one morning, start a bank in our garage. There's licensing, there's charters, there's lots of regulation. Could that be something that slows down disruption in a way that you didn't see?
Absolutely, because there's a lot more zeros in the banking system than most other industries. You take the tobacco industry, it's an $800 billion a year industry. You take the global financial industry, I have no idea how many trillions that is. It's not as easy as setting up an Instagram going, hey, I'm going to set up a website in my garage. So naturally there's going to be more barriers, and naturally there are more people at stake, and there are more people who are grandfathered in, who've had a certain way of doing things, and they're frightened, right? So there's always a fear, and I don't mean that they're petrified of, somebody's going to come over and take over the banking system, but they're frightened of change. And I think, the ones who embrace it, they tend to be the ones who, in the early days, are regarded as, well, this is going to be a fad, this is going to be a fad, and they'll end up making great businesses out of it. So who knows where it ends up, but yeah, absolutely, there's fear there. And you combine that with regulation and laws and rules are a great way to instill fear in the people. And a lot of the time there's valid reasons for having these rules and having this fear factor, because you just cannot have every Tom, Dick and Harry kind of creating a mini bank out there without any consumer protection.
As a VC who's been spending a lot of time in the Bitcoin space now, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are looking for capital in terms of, how to approach potential investors based on the pitches that you've heard so far?
So I must have spent, best part of a year, met over 40 companies in the Bitcoin space. The first thing I would say to all of them is there was a presentation by Maria from DirectPayNet about an hour ago. Everyone should go and read that presentation, reread it, to actually understand what goes on in the business world. What I have seen, and again, this is just my opinion, is a lot of people who I'm seeing who are wanting to build business in the Bitcoin industry have no experience of running a business. And don't get me wrong, I'm a high school dropout. I didn't even finish my high school, so who am I to talk? But over the years, I've run enough businesses and had enough failures to understand the fundamentals of running, an enterprise, which is profit and loss, cash flow, what a balance sheet looks like. So what I'm seeing is you have a lot of people with great ideas, with zero or minimal execution experience, but also the strategy a lot of the time is hope. And hope is not a strategy. It's great if it's your money, but think about it. I mean, for me, I invest my own money, but if you're a VC out there, chances are your money, the millions of pounds, are from limited partners such as Yale or Princeton. Yeah? So one side you've got billions of dollars, and they are taking many different bets, and some of them are safe, some of them high risk. On the other side, you've got Johnny from Estonia who's got this great idea for an app, and the divide there is so big, and the two of them aren't necessarily speaking the same language. So what I always try and say is, and I don't want to mistake this with regulation, what I'm trying to say, from what I am seeing, is certain amount of adult supervision is required before it goes to total chaos.
Adult supervision. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I met an entrepreneur about 2 months ago, and I said, he's in the Bitcoin space, and I said, what are you working on? He said, no, I'm working on a wallet for the emerging markets, feature phones, so not smartphones, feature phones for the emerging markets, especially India and Africa. I'm like, great idea, I'm sure there's a big need for it. I said, okay, tell me about your security backup plan. And he looked at me, said, what happens when you get run over by a bus? He said, well, I've given my mum the password, right? That was his whole defensive measure. And I try and be a realist, and I say to him, I will tell you what happens in the real world. Somebody in Africa has got $100,000 or $1 million worth of Bitcoins, which somehow they decided to use your product because they thought this was the best product on the market, and you get run over by a bus. You think they're just going to accept going, oh, Johnny got run over by a bus, that's it, we lost $100,000. It doesn't quite work like that in the real world, And again, we come to that hope, and his thing was, well, hopefully I'll never get run over by a bus. So one, as an investor, hope is not something I can go to sleep at night going, well, I've got this great investment, and the entrepreneur hopes he doesn't get run over. So there is a lot of idealism, but hey, that's a good thing, because Daniel Ek, who's the founder of Spotify, he was an idealist. He was a 22-year-old kid when I met him, and I said, how are we going to fix this? And he's like, I'll find a way. But he'd done businesses before, whilst there was a certain amount of naivety and confidence, he understood the fundamentals of what the other party wanted. Living in denial and not understanding how the global ecosystem of business actually works is a dangerous thing to be involved in. And I hate to keep on going on about it, but I sat there and I was mesmerized by the presentation that Maria did, because she actually explains it in plain English, which is great, there's no friction and merchants aren't being charged as much as the credit card companies are charging. You try and go and buy $10 worth of Bitcoins out there. I think it'll be easy if you get on a plane, go to Mount Gox and just camp outside and knock on the door going, here's my $10, can you give me some Bitcoins? Because they're not going to send them to you, right? So this is, you talk about frictionless, I think this is the highest form of friction that we're dealing with, right? Nobody talks about that because you know what? It's not cool to talk about that.
I have definitely learned through experience that the hardest part about Bitcoin is getting them. That's where all the friction is at the entry points. Once you have them, it's really easy to send. And, it's almost like if you were to build the financial system from scratch, it would look more like Bitcoin. But in fact, that's not the financial system we have inherited. And to get your Bitcoins, unless someone sends them to you for free, you've got to work with that financial system.
Well, if there was a new financial system built today, I'm guessing 50% of the liquidity wouldn't be controlled out of one building in Tokyo, would it? We live in a world, and I don't know how many people there are in Tokyo, but it definitely doesn't have 50% of the world's population. So you take all those factors in. But again, we're in an industry which is growing, so change is going to come. So we have to embrace change. What I always try and say, and we come back to the adult supervision, that it's all very well saying, we don't need regulation and we probably don't need interference. But who is going to regulate all of this? Because we come back to the situation of there are investors who want to invest in solid business models. There are entrepreneurs who'd like to build great companies, but the fundamentals there aren't necessarily aligned because the two people, the entrepreneurs go, well, I want to bring down the central bank. I mean, I've met entrepreneurs who's like, I want to bring down the central bank. Introduce me to some VCs. It's like, you do realize the people who you're talking about bringing down are the same people who you're expecting to fund you, because I don't know many Bitcoiners who are running multi-billion-dollar funds. So just this divide. So I think some sort of education and accepting this is the real world. This is not a fairy tale. And I spend a lot of time in the normal web space, as call it. It's always great to look at Kevin Systrom from Instagram. Hey, it was a photo app and he sold it for $1 billion. I know about 4,000 other guys who created a photo app who've gone back to their 9-to-5 jobs because it didn't work. So, just taking, we can change the world. Great. And I hope it happens in some shape or form. But, you have to look at the bigger picture that there's a lot more going on in the world than, hey, we're going to go on Bitcoin Talk Forum and together we're going to bring down the global financial system.
Starting with the Fed, of course. I want to talk a little bit about compliance. Clearly, professionalism is important and understanding how business works is important. There is a debate in the startup world, even outside of Bitcoin. You see this when you read about Uber, the taxi app, Airbnb. Is it better to, when it comes to regulators, and particularly when you have a disruptive technology that does not perfectly map to the categories that everyone understands, is it better to ask permission or to beg forgiveness? And is the answer to that question different in money than it would be in other regulated industries?
It's an interesting question. I lived in China for a few years, and there, asking permission for anything, you get given a no because it stems from the communist mindset back in the day that the person who says yes is responsible, right? So you go and ask somebody, say, can I do this? And they say to you, yes, you can. They're the single point of responsibility. When anything else fails, somebody says, who authorized this? So it's far easier to say no. And then you've got, asking for forgiveness. So you go back to, well, let's do this and we'll live in hope. And I think it depends in different sectors. The issue we've got right now, and especially in the Bitcoin space, and whether people admit it or not, is nobody has a clue what's going on. Right? I mean, I would like to think Coindesk, which is one of the bigger publications. Actually, I'm curious, who reads Coindesk here? Right. A lot of people. Now, you'd think I'd be sitting up here going, I'm an expert, I know everything. And I'll use a swear word here. I'm clueless. I seriously am, right? As are most people in this room. However, we come back to, well, I read this article and I read that article, which makes me an expert. Nobody has any idea what's going on, and everyone collectively is living in a bit of hope, going, well, if we keep on all talking about it, hopefully somebody somewhere along the line is going to figure it out. Inside the banks, nobody actually knows whose division it is. I'm sure it started off with the guy who was doing the Twitter account going, oh, there's this new startup thing called Bitcoin. Yeah. Can you deal with it? I had an email from somebody yesterday going, I have some friends that'd like to talk to the guy behind Bitcoin. Can you introduce him? Like, sorry, and these are, serious people who don't actually know. So, what was the question again? Anyway? How long the question was?
Is it better to ask permission or to beg forgiveness?
So, who do you ask permission from? The Twitter or the social media guy? Do you go up to him going, "Stop tweeting. Can I run this exchange?" Yeah. Where I'm not going to answer questions when people, and you know what, I may just pack up and go away for 2 weeks and put a sign up, no offense to Charlie Shrem, put a holding page up going, hey, we're redoing our platform, redoing our website, see ya, we're out of here, right? Is he going to give you permission for that? So I don't even know who one's supposed to be going to ask permission. So you end up going to the wrong people, right? So you end up going to the people that are like, oh, this seems money laundering. Let's send it straight over to the money laundering unit. And they're like, well, there is no money here. What have they laundered, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the whole thing. And then you've got lawyers talking about it. And I'll give you another prime example. I'm letting it all out today, by the way. I met a lawyer last week who's advising a startup who wants to raise money. And I said, what's your regulation situation? They're like, we have this amazing lawyer. He's a Bitcoin expert. I was like, can I meet him? So I meet him. I'm like, we start talking. How many Bitcoins do you have? And he looks at me and he's like, none. And I'm like, how can you possibly advise? You're the single person in this meeting room who can send these guys to jail or keep them out of jail, and you've never bought a Bitcoin? But what I realized was all he does is read Coindesk. And if I, as the publisher and
there you go.
Coindesk, am sitting here going, I don't have a clue, but he's making a great business, and unfortunately that's where the naivety comes in. Peter and Lucy doing the startups outside, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Because he's got a title of X, Y, Z, he can now make a great business of advising them of stuff which I am busy trying to outsource to freelance writers who I've never met, who are writing it, which they've seen on Bitcoin, Reddit's Bitcoin forum. That's the truth of what's going on in this industry. But you know what? We can gloss it up as much as we like. So. Mm-hmm. You did want a fireside chat, right?
Yes.
So here it is.
You are listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin, the premier audiocast providing news and insights that cover the rapidly evolving world of digital money. Our twice-weekly shows include analysis of late-breaking news, updates on key technical, business, and regulatory issues, and in-depth interviews with the key people driving the new digital economy. Let's Talk Bitcoin offers sponsors an attractive way to reach a targeted and savvy audience. For more information, email sponsors@letstalkbitcoin.com.
Hi, this is Jason King, founder at Sean's Outpost, and you are listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin. Sean's Outpost is a homeless outreach in Pensacola, Florida, and we are proudly powered by Bitcoin. To date, over 13,000 meals have been fed to the homeless in our area, all purchased with Bitcoin and through the generosity of the cryptocurrency community. Read more about us at SEANSOutpost.com. Food, shelter, Bitcoin, everybody. Sean'sOutpost.com.
More like a bar-side chat. Just to, not to keep harping on this, but I mean, part of what I was thinking of when I asked that question is, I mentioned Uber. Uber gets a lot of customers, and then they deal with the taxi commission and the local taxi commission, and therefore it is a little bit trickier politically to. For the established interest to say,
it's
no, you
city
can't
by
do
city,
that.
right?
Yeah, city by city.
I know that space very well. It's city by city, and whilst it is regulated from somewhere along the line in the government, it's not controlled centrally. Yeah. There isn't the World Bank, there isn't IMF, there isn't trillions and trillions of dollars at stake. And some they win and some they lose. They're having an issue in Denver at the moment. They had an issue with Sweden, and every country and every city has certain different restrictions. I'll give you an example. Stockholm said to them, we have no problem with you operating here as long as you put a meter of some kind which shows the user when they're in the car how much your bill has racked up. Uber decided that that's not something which they believed in, and they decided not to do it, right? So there are small problems. The financial services, we come back to, I don't even know who to talk to, right? Do I go talk to somebody in Wall Street? Do I talk to somebody in Switzerland? Nobody really knows who to talk to, and there's different conversations. And we ran a story about the HMRC, which is the UK's revenue governing body, and they gave a great statement going, we don't think you need to be licensed under X, Y, Z, and it looked like a great thing, and it said underneath, by the way, this could change at any moment, which it becomes legal or illegal, and you have to make relevant changes. So you can go and build a whole business model, and one email that could come from them means you're illegal overnight. So I don't even know where or who to start with this at the moment. So.
Yeah. PayPal during their formative years, they had a lot of struggles with regulators, and there's a great story that I think it was Louisiana. They were told by the state regulator, you need a license, or you don't have the right licensing, you've got to shut down in Louisiana. But at that point, they had a lot of customers in Louisiana, and those Louisiana PayPal customers burned up the phone lines.
Yeah.
Is there a calculated risk to take of creating facts on the ground?
There is, but then you come back to how can an army of people who want to remain anonymous burn up the phone lines, right? What are we going to do? Set up anonymous email accounts? So this is the challenge, right? You want to remain, you don't want anyone to know what you're doing, but then, the invisible man doesn't exist. 5,000 people can't just turn up at the regulator's office going, we want to use Bitcoin, but we don't want you to know we're using Bitcoin. Approve it for us. So, not to make a joke of it, because it's a very serious matter, I think there are a lot of different parallels which can be taken in. But, we're headed in the right direction, right? Events like this and the right people are starting to take notice of it. There just isn't any magic wand, right? If there was one single person in a organization who you could sit down and explain the logic to, that'd be great, but there just isn't. And then, there are certain other consumer issues that come at stake, and a prime example is recurring monthly billing. Right? A lot of people come to me, and the first thing they come to me and say, hey, would you like to invest in our company? I'm thinking about it. And maybe you can help us get the Spotify account, because Spotify is going to do $1 billion, and they'd be great for recurring billing. And I'm like, they should take Bitcoin. I said, I get that, but if we come to this month, the average price or the normal price is $9.99 a month for premium service. If it's $9.99, what is it, 0.1 Bitcoin today, and it's fine. The price goes up and down. In 3 months' time, you may be paying $250 a month for Spotify. So, who's going to control this element there, right? And, the average consumer doesn't want to be playing the currency markets. Huh. The traders in Wall Street, they're quite comfortable because there's arbitrage opportunities, but the average consumer, it's unfair on them to put this burden of volatility. At one stage you're going, this is the future, this is safe, etc. And the next stage you're going, oh, by the way, your Spotify service this month costs $250.
I would think there would be a fairly easy solution to that. If you have a service like Coinbase, and you authorize Coinbase to deduct the equivalent of $9.99 from your Bitcoin account, or blockchain or whoever. The math can't be too complicated for an algorithm or whatever.
To you and I, but think about who we are dealing with here and how far this journey has to go till we get to that stage. We've already accepted trying to buy coins is, a bit of a headache. You tried using blockchain. Most teams, most companies have a UI team, which is make this product work really well. And I know the guys at blockchain, I'm sure they have an anti-UI team. They're like, here's a great product, make it really, really hard to use. It took me many months to work out that's where my coins were, because it seemed like there was this data thing and some charts going on. So we are probably here, we need to get here, and there are random pockets of information that people are going to get involved, which hopefully will get it towards the end solution. And then, is it Bitcoin or is it another form of digital currency? I honestly don't know. I'm a believer in digital currency, or what I call money over IP, friction. I don't really care if it's pegged to the Bitcoin, because it's obviously a friction that people want solving, and Bitcoin is the best out there at the moment.
We've got about 10 more minutes, and Shaq's got to get on a plane. So I think it would be a good time to take questions from the audience.
Hi, I'm Carol Van Cleef with Patton Boggs, and I was glad to hear the reference you made to your lawyer, or the lawyer sitting at the table, using the pronoun he instead of she. I think it's a very serious issue that everyone in the room who's trying to make that decision of how they're going to move forward, whether to go ahead and ask for forgiveness later, that's fine in one kind of setting, but you have to realize there are multiple people at the table on this issue. And one of them is the Department of Justice. And things are fine as long as they're going well. But if something goes wrong, and it could be the slightest little thing that puts you on the radar of the Department of Justice, the first thing they're going to come after on is, are you registered appropriately with FinCEN, and have you appropriately addressed the money transmitter licensing issue? And all they need, some of you have heard me say before, is one state to put up a hand and say, you needed a license in this state. And that's the basis of a federal criminal action. It's going on real time right now. The Department of Justice is really taken off after third-party payment processors and is doing this right now. And we're seeing it with some of the, probably more innocent, as I would say, players in the marketplace. But for whatever reason, they end up on the radar screen. So if it happens, it's almost a game over type situation. There are steps you could take to make it show that you've been trying to make a good faith effort, like sending in letters to the states, maybe putting applications in and so on, if you've already begun the activity. But we're in, especially with Bitcoin, a very, very delicate situation right now. If you talk to some of the state regulators, the feedback from the state regulators is a great deal of law enforcement interest around the issue. So it's on the radar screen. So I know that it was a very entertaining presentation that you just made, but I have to come in with a little bit of a dose of reality here, because unfortunately I end up on the other side having to bail people out of these situations.
One, you were supposed to ask a question, but you made a statement, which is fine, because I made a statement.
Well, it's supposed to be a chat, I thought.
I also made a statement, and all we can do is give our opinions, right? So for me, do I feel comfortable investing in an industry where there are too many unknowns? Probably not. I'm very, very aware, and that's probably why I am not investing, because there have been cases, and if you take the gambling industry, where the investors and board members are responsible, and sometimes you can look at it from a legal aspect that, hang on a minute, you're the board, you were the ones who were supposed to be supervising this, but until there is some clear clarification, so you take the FinCEN, you take the anti-money laundering rules, there is so much noise out there that for me as an investor, it's way too much to even process, to decide, and I am all for having lawyers, and because it's required in any shape or form. What I'm not for is people thinking just because they met a lawyer and he may have been doing real estate the week before, and it comes back to what I was saying, that if you haven't run businesses, you don't have domain expertise to go and do the right due diligence on the right lawyer to see, is this the person who's going to keep me out of jail or not? So I think fundamentally, I agree with everything you say.
Another question?
How do you think an entrepreneur like Mark Zuckerberg would respond to adult supervision?
That's a good question.
How do I think an entrepreneur like Mark Zuckerberg?
Yeah.
So Mark Zuckerberg has a lot of adult supervision around him. If you look at his board, It consists of Mark Andreessen, who was the founder in Netscape. It consists of Reed Hastings, who is the founder of Netflix. It consists of Peter Thiel, who's the founder of PayPal. I would like to think those are three adults who have gone through disruptive industry changes over the last 10 years and fought a lot of battles. He surrounds himself with a lot of smart people.
So would you say that just surrounding yourself with the right people while retaining control of your board is a good move for
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Would you say that just surrounding yourself with smart people while retaining legal, board control is a good idea for an entrepreneur?
Facebook, and it's similar to what Mark said, the finance industry is slightly different. Mark Zuckerberg, didn't create a bank. He created a bank of information which consists of every person in the world having an account, and he's got his own challenges ongoing, and the company, as do all large internet companies, but he didn't fundamentally try and disrupt the global financial system. So it probably needs disrupting in some shape or form. I think the parallels are slightly different, but if you were to go and ask Mark, say, hey, when you started, he would say, the most important thing I did was surround myself with people who'd run business. Let's not forget, Mark Zuckerberg was in a dorm in his college or university, and Sean Parker actually flew out there with the last bit of money he had, and Sean Parker had done Napster. I mean, it's a story I've lived, having been involved in Spotify. Sean Parker had done Napster. He'd been sued for billions and billions of dollars. So whilst he had gone through, and let's take Napster and Bitcoin in the same space, that he'd lived through the challenges but came out on the other side. And I guess his valuable lesson to Mark Zuckerberg was, let's not upset the people who can send us to jail or sue us for trillions of dollars. So adult supervision in any shape or form is very important.
And of course, don't forget Sheryl Sandberg,
yes,
as far as adult supervision goes.
Hi, Shaq. My name is Susan Hyun. My question for you, actually, I'll piggyback off of the other two questions that were previously presented.
Me too, Connie.
I'll piggyback off the two questions that were previously presented. So in relevant to government activity, how does Spotify as well as Coindesk anticipate that for the future? And to also piggyback off of the social media question regarding Facebook, I agree with your statement that he has surrounded himself with some very intelligent individuals. How does Spotify and your take on Coindesk as far as monetization in the music industry specifically? What is your thought process surrounding that as far as embedded content, as well as protecting the right, protecting rights holders for artists?
Are we referring to the Spotify business model as such, or the link of that with digital currency and Bitcoin? I'm curious.
I'm tabling that question to you to answer both topics.
Okay, so one, I'm sitting here as a minor investor in Spotify, but our agreements are with the rights holders, right? So
yes,
we didn't do what a lot of people did in the music space, which is let's ask for permission or after we've launched, which is why it took Spotify many, many years to get the licenses required. And that was a 4-year struggle of going continuously knocking on the doors. And that conversation changed over the years, because what we were able to do was, starting in a small country like Sweden with 9 million people, which on the global level of music sales was probably country number 19, and then show how that worked in that country, and then go, well, now it's working in Norway, and now we've tried it here, and then for the US market, which is the world's largest music market, to go, well, okay, there is some traction, rather than for the rights holders to risk everything on one bet, which would be crazy for them. At the same time, whilst this was going on, and we still had this conversation up until last year, and even these days we have it, you'll have a conversation with the rights holder. It's like, I don't believe in this change, and I'm quite happy selling CDs, and I don't want my music on Spotify or any other digital service. And you go to him, you do realize there are millions of pirate copies of your file, of your music, audio file, on the web, which you have no control over. And a lot of them really don't have an answer for that. So I think there is a possible lack of education on both sides that, technology is trying to change, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take a certain amount of time before the digital revenue is equivalent to what the CD sales were. But at the same time, you still have what's going on, which is whether it's pirated DVDs or pirated CDs, you still have websites out there who are giving away the content free of charge. So I think it's a much bigger play, and are the labels rights holders? Yes. Are they regulators? Probably no, but there are regulators involved. But if you are actually doing what you're supposed to do, there is very minimal regulation required. I think that's that. In terms of Coindesk, it's a self-funded project by me. It's started off because I wanted information. I'm in absolutely no rush to monetize this. It was just really for me to learn about the space and be a better informed investor. And it's actually had the opposite effect, because I thought having all this proprietary knowledge about the space would allow me to make more investments. I haven't done a single investment since I launched Coindesk because there's an overflow of information and there's far too many opportunities, but the risk factor is too high for me and my appetite to invest in. I hope that answers your question in some shape.
That does, actually. Thank you. Actually, one more question for you. How is your current existing business models? How do you foresee that in competition relative to the spaces that you're doing business in, relative to festivals and ID&T merger, things that are within that space, again, back to the monetization issue?
Sorry, could you repeat the last part again?
So how are you looking at competitors, such as big mergers and acquisitions, especially in the music and monetization space, such as ID&T, who has now come to North America, and tabling that with large labels such as Columbia, Sony, and so on, to your existing business model?
You don't like this answer, but luckily I don't have to get involved in any of that stuff.
Actually, I like that answer.
Yeah, I have no involvement in that. I mean, there are people far smarter than me involved in thinking about the bigger play. And hey, for me, it was one part of a journey. I have 15 investments. The one in the Bitcoin industry, right, which I actively made an investment, was the company called BitPay, and I believe Tony's over there somewhere. There he is. And for me, the investment in that was, one, in Tony and the team, two, in what they were doing. So my investment in BitPay, I don't look at it as a Bitcoin investment. I look at it as a technology investment, because digital currency is going to come. And I have enough gray hairs to know that I know how this one plays out, and the people who are providing the services on the side are the ones that I want to back, because it's somebody who I can help scale versus investing in something which is taking a far higher risk. As an example, an exchange. I looked at a number of exchanges, and I wasn't comfortable with that.
Thank you very much.
I think we are out of time.
Yep, exactly. I want to thank you, first of all, Marc, for doing a great job.
My pleasure.
Throughout the conference. And Shaq, thanks a lot. It was a last-minute addition, and it was just wonderful having you here. So let's give these guys both a big round of applause.
Hi, this is Jason King, founder at Sean's Outpost, and you are listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin. Sean's Outpost is a homeless outreach in Pensacola, Florida, and we are proudly powered by Bitcoin. To date, over 13,000 meals have been fed to the homeless in our area, all purchased with Bitcoin and through the generosity of the cryptocurrency community. Read more about us at seansoutpost.com. Food, shelter, Bitcoin, everybody. Sean'sOutpost.com.